Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm broadcasting live, September 9th, 2015. Today we have a rather longish quote. Maybe let's take turns. Want to read the first paragraph?
Sure. Once while Venerable Ananda was dwelling near Kosambi in Gosita Park, Badaji approached him and Ananda asked him, "Good Badaji, what is the highest of sights, the highest of sounds, the highest of joys, the highest of conscious states, the highest state of being?"
There is Brahma, who is all-powerful. None are more powerful, all-seeing, with great power and dominion. To see Brahma is the highest of sights. There are the gods of radiant splendor, in whom joy flows and overflow, and who utter a cry of joy, O joy. To hear this is the highest of sounds. There are the all-lustrous gods who feel joy, but who rejoice in silence, and this is the highest of joys. There are the gods who go to the sphere of nothingness, and this is the highest of conscious states. Then there are the gods who go to the sphere of neither consciousness nor unconsciousness, and this is the highest state of being.
Then Ananda replied, "But Badaji, what you say is just the talk of the common crowd. Listen, pay attention, and I will speak. If while one looks the defilements are destroyed, this is the highest of sights. If while one listens the defilements are destroyed, this is the highest of sounds. If while one rejoices the defilements are destroyed, this is the highest of joy. If while one is conscious the defilements are destroyed, this is the highest of conscious states. And if while one is, the defilements are destroyed, this is the highest state of being."
Okay, surely it's not too small that you have to post them in the chat. Is it really still too small? Brooklyn? Well, today we were out in the sun. I have a red hen to prove it. And we met a lot of people interested in Buddhism, met some Buddhists. I even spoke Thai to one fellow. And I spoke Sinhalese to another man from Alberta. That was interesting. But I'm at the very end, just as we were getting ready to pack up, this Christian pastor came up and started debating. And his contention was that without God, you can't talk about good and evil. You can't give meaning to things, right? Because it's all subjective. Everyone has their own meaning. Which means that if you believe pigs can fly, then pigs can fly. I mean, it's a bit ridiculous because there are obviously laws of nature that don't require a God. Don't obviously, there's no obvious reason to believe they require a God to exist. Things are the way they are. But there was a question about happiness and suffering. How can you understand happiness? I mean, he was really reaching. It's hard to argue with these people. That's why I say don't argue with them. But it was the end of the day, and I wasn't really interested in learning about Christianity, so instead I started arguing. Bad idea, probably. But this quote reminds me of is people's fixation on the highest, fixation on something divine, the awe that people are in. Ordinary people, right? We call them putujana. Putujana. Hmm. Huh. It doesn't use the word putujana. It uses bahuna janena. Sametiko idang ayasmato badi badajisa. What you say is the knowledge or the understanding of. I don't quite get that, but anyway, it's something to do with how it's, as he says, just the talk of the common crowd. Talk, I'm not sure if it's talk. So common people. What do we mean by common people? For those who I think haven't gone to the extent of really understanding the building blocks of reality. So it's kind of laziness to appeal to higher beings because it's easy and you don't have to go in depth. You can at some point just say, I believe. You have to, because it doesn't follow logically based on empirical evidence. I mean, not on scrutiny, under scrutiny. But this is an interesting argument. If you were asked what is the highest sound, well, if you'd heard the sound of the all lustrous gods, oh no, wait, the sound, the Brahma, right? No, the highest sight, the gods of radiant splendor who utter a cry of joy, oh joy. If you'd heard it, you'd have a hard time disagreeing with this guy, I think. If you'd ever seen Brahma, you'd have a hard time disagreeing that Brahma was the greatest of sights. I don't know who was, I think Buddhists would argue that the Buddha had a greater splendor. This is traditional Buddhists. Modern Buddhists would say the Buddha just looked like an ordinary monk, because there's actually some indication that he looked like an ordinary monk. So maybe Brahma looked more splendiferous or splendorous. But Ananda cuts right through this. It's quite impressive, actually. It's not how we normally see Ananda. Ananda is normally the one making the mistakes. Or when he does teach, it's rather populist and wise, but this is the sort of thing we'd expect from the Buddha. It's quite impressive, I think, for him to deny that and deny any meaning in what Badaji has said. And he says something very powerful here. That it's not actually the sound that has any benefit to it. But if that sound, that sight, right? That sight or that sound, that joy, that state, whatever that state may be, if that leads you to enlightenment, then there can be no greater experience. I mean, except for the actual enlightenment itself that comes from it. But there can be no greater sight. It's really the only meaning that Buddhists ascribe to reality. There's no purpose to anything. Seeing Brahma holds no purpose. listening to these gods of these angels of whatever they are, radiant splendor. Abhasara, the Abhasara. Abhasara is radiance. To see them, Yodang sadang sunati idang savananang agang. Whoever hears that sound, that is the highest savana, the highest hearing, the height of hearing. There's no purpose to it, no meaning, no benefit. So there's no good. You can't truthfully say it's the highest sound. It's no higher than hearing someone fart or burp. Not in the scheme of things. So then you say, well, Buddhism holds no meaning or no purpose, but we do. We do acknowledge one meaning and purpose, because it's special in the sense that it frees you from sights and sounds and smells and tastes. Frees you from anything that might lead you to give rise to the question, what's the purpose of that? So once you're free from all that, you could say you've found ultimate purpose. I mean, it's just words, but there's something special to it. And that's such powerful meditative advice. That sound should just be sound, sight should just be sight. It's not the quality or the nature of the sound, it's how you behave in regards to it. Does it lead you to wisdom, or does it lead you to delusion, attachment, ignorance? So if listening to these gods or seeing Brahma leads you to give rise to wrong view, like, oh, he's the great Brahma and he's God and he's our creator, yada yada yada, then it's a very bad thing to see in that case. That seeing was by no means useful or beneficial or high. So thank you, Ananda. Sadhu. So awesome that we have these teachings. I wish I had pictures for you all from today. We didn't take any pictures. I tried to get them to take pictures. We almost had, it was Eric was about to snap a picture, and then someone came to the table and he put his camera down and started talking to them, and then we forgot about it. We ended up taking down everything without any pictures. But it was neat talking to people. A lot of interested people. As soon as you bring up the word, I think if we had been more proactive, like the guys next to us, we were smushed in between the Korean Catholic or the Korean Christians Association and somebody called Life, I think, Life Ministry or something. They're on campus. They're surrounded by Christians. Across the way from us were the Muslims. The Hindus were over here. The Hindus were nice. One of the Hindu guys came up to us and signed up, I think. He's interested in meditation. And I said, yeah, I'd like to sign up for your club as well. I was saying, it'd be neat to see what the Hindus are up to. I mean, not exactly, but sort of. Talk Sanskrit and stuff. But yeah, so and they were all proactive. These guys on our right, they were really active, and they were sometimes standing in front of our table, but that was okay. A lot of them. They were nice. They gave me a bottle of water, so you gotta love people who are kind. But if we had been like saying stuff like, "Hey, meditation," and interested in meditation, it just didn't seem very Buddhist to do that sort of thing. I think that probably impresses people that we weren't proactive. But it's interesting, having a Buddhist club and standing there as a monk and thinking, "What am I doing here again?" It was great. It was great to meet people and talk, and great to see such interest. So we've got 98 people signed up. Hopefully they'll all come. Some of them will come on the 20th. Some of them were Buddhists. There were Sri Lankans and um, some people who I didn't know. One Vietnamese. I mean, mostly Canadians, but with background to the extent that they called themselves Buddhists. There were people who came up and said, "Oh, we're Buddhist. I'm Buddhist." Then there were Western people. One guy who practices vipassana. A few people who practice meditation. People of all, of all walks of life. Really have a diverse campus. I grew up. I grew up in northern Ontario, where everybody's like white like me. We had like one black guy at our school. I don't know whether he had a hard time or not, but it's awesome to see. I didn't even think McMaster was this multicultural before, but it's just every type of person. So Canada's kind of cool that way, I think. So we've got good potential. Anyway, enough about all that. I think enough about the quote. It has a point, simple point. It's an awesome point. But now we've made the point. Do you have any questions?
We do. While meditating today, I felt extremely happy. Might happiness be a distraction as well as sadness?
Absolutely. Happiness is a bigger distraction because you never ask, what am I going to do? What should I do? When you feel happy, you don't say, oh my gosh, what should I do? I'm happy. When you feel sad, you tend to question and wonder what the cure is and how to be free from it. So at least you're posing the question. With happiness, it's easy to become complacent and think, oh, well, this is nice. This must be what I'm supposed to do because I feel happy. I must be doing something right. I mean, actually, sure, you could argue that you did something right and that's what led you to be happy. But being happy in and of itself is not doing anything right. Happiness doesn't lead to happiness. So you have to be extra vigilant and acknowledge happy. But it's awesome. It's awesome that you can be real happy. But I read my latest chapter. Happiness is an upakilesa.
Could people who invade a foreign land be reborn as descendants of the invaded?
Anybody can be born as anybody, so you don't have to speculate too much. It's possible to be born anywhere. It's very complicated where you're going to be born. It's very much based on your mind right before you die, and all sorts of factors involved. But that being said, that's all just fluff, really, because the point that you're making is pretty awesome. Rich people who are stingy will probably end up being the poor people. People who keep slaves will probably end up becoming the slaves. Invaders will end up being born as the people who are subjugated. But there's another aspect there of just familiarity, right? So the imperialists, when they invaded the lands, they become familiar with. Often they would take as slaves these the African people or the Asian people, the Indian people, Sri Lankan, just the whole world, South American people, Central American, North American First Nations people. And when they start to become more familiar with them, then for sure their minds will, and also because of the cruelty and the intensity of that. I mean, actually, the intensity of the slave owners and all that, and even rich people who are supremely stingy, they're not going to be born as a human, not likely. They're more likely to be born in hell. But even when they come out of hell, the residue is most likely to, you never get off the hook. That's what's awesome about Buddhism. If you believe in this concept of karma, it's really pretty awesome. I mean, you don't ever have to feel, it's actually scary, but it relieves you of all of this. Why do people get away scot-free and how dare they, and etc., etc. It turns everything around and you feel so sorry for those people. And you look at it and you just think, oh, I can't imagine what that person's going to have to go through based on those evil deeds. Just the horror of being that person and having their future awaiting them. You feel more sorry for the person who's doing the evil deeds. I was kind of twisted, really. Maybe not more sorry, but in a sense, because pain and suffering are not evil. They're not a cause for concern, really. I mean, not in the same way that evil is. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not that pain is a good thing, or that it's harmless when someone gets tortured or raped or murdered, but the person doing it is the one who's they'll receive it 100 times or 1,000 times over. And you can imagine these people who torture and rape others. The idea is that then they have to go through it like thousands of times. So you know, so who should you feel more sorry for, really? Maybe not sorry for exactly, but more cringeworthy is the act, the evil act. Anyway, Robin, were you gonna trying to say something and I didn't let you?
No, no, it's just interesting. Can you talk about sukha and the different kinds of sukha? What joy is wholesome and what joy isn't?
Joy in and of itself isn't wholesome or unwholesome. Joy is a Vedana, and Vedana is ethically neutral. A joyful feeling, somanasa. But somanasa can be associated with either greed, lobha, or kusala. Any kind of kusala. There are 412, I think, kusala minds that are associated with somanasa, joy. So basically wholesomeness. If you do a good deed, you can feel happy about it. You can also feel neutral about it. But at the time when you're doing wholesomeness, at the time when you're performing wholesomeness or receiving the consequences of wholesome acts, uh, those are wholesome joy. You can experience joy associated with the wholesomeness, but the joy itself is neutral. And that's important from a meditative point of view, to realize that joy is not good or bad. It's just neutral. So there's two kinds of joy. There's different kinds of sukha. I mean, it's a good question, and there are many ways of enumerating, categorizing. First of all, there's physical happiness, which is like bodily pleasure. Then there is mental pleasure, mental happiness, which is the joy, as I said, two types. But that's somanasa, that's joy. It's mental happiness. Then there's amisa sukha, happiness that takes an object, something makes you happy, versus niramisa sukha, happiness that is free from an object, happiness that springs up uh, in the mind, irrespective of the object. There's Lokya Sukha, happiness that is mundane. So that's all these kind of sukhas that we've been talking about. And then there's Lokuttara Sukha, which is actually free from Vedana. It's not a Vedana. It's not a feeling. It's happiness that is peace, that is freedom. That's the highest happiness. In fact, Buddha said that's the only happiness. Natti santi parang sukhang. There's no happiness but peace, or other than peace. So all those other types of happiness in the end are not really considered happiness. And I had this argument once. People were saying, that's all dukkha. Jhanas are dukkha. Any kind of wholesome is all dukkha. It's all the truth of suffering. And I said, yeah, but I was just arguing because people get so pedantic about these things. Sure, it's correct. It's the truth of suffering, but you don't get very far saying that. It is happiness. And Buddha recognized it. But he recognized the disadvantages and the drawbacks of all other kinds of happiness, but nibbana.
The Buddha taught others to free themselves, but isn't the act of teaching not attachment?
No, No, acts are not attachment. Acts are also ethically neutral. It's the mind state behind the act. If you want to teach, then yeah, wanting is greed or attachment. But if someone invites you to teach, then quite often it's the path of least resistance to teach them. Life becomes more difficult, more complicated when you refuse, because then they wonder why, and then they go and criticize you to others, and suddenly you're lynched and driven out of town, and life becomes difficult. It's the proper act. It's the most harmonious, clear, clean thing to do, to teach. We're not stones. We don't just, human beings are, we have life. And so an arahant behaves naturally. Part of that is, not always, but usually teaching. And the Buddha had so much of um, this momentum built up from so many lifetimes of teaching and preparing to teach that it would have been shocking if he didn't teach. Just to stop all of that momentum, what was natural. But it was only once he was asked. He only taught when he was asked.
If one is dying from hunger or disease, etc., without having experienced nibbana, becoming sotapanna, should one practice satipatthana vipassana until the last minute, or try to develop the first jhana if one is not?
Definitely Satipatthana Vipassana. First of all, because it's hard to enter into the first jhana when you're dying of hunger or disease. It's caused some monks to kill themselves because they couldn't enter into the jhanas like they usually did. But second of all, because the practicing the jhana, if you could manage to do it, would only lead you to the Brahma realm. So it's not. That's if you can manage to hold on to the concentration at the last moment at the moment of death. But with Satipatthana Vipassana, um, doesn't matter where you're reborn. I mean, your mind is clear, you're present. It puts you very much in line with the Buddha's teaching, um, close to the Buddha's asana. Just ready. If you practice Satipatthana Vipassana at the moment of death, where you're going to be born in the next life is going to be the purest, most clear, most closest to Buddhists and Buddhism that you could hope for, because it's clarity of mind. The jhanas are not clarity of mind, not in the same way. I mean, they are clarity of mind, but not based on wisdom. Definitely, the jhanas are inferior in this case. I mean, the jhanas are always inferior to vipassana. I mean, I guess the only problem is if you're not. It depends what stage you're at. If suppose you came to Buddhism today knowing nothing about meditation or Buddhism, and then you realized you were dying, right? You realized you were dying of hunger or thirst or dying of disease. Which should you do? It's a more interesting question, I suppose, because you're not proficient at anything. I still wouldn't argue that. I think in this case, definitely for both those reasons, it doesn't really change. You should still work hard. I mean, actually, even more so if you were a newcomer. Like if you had training in jhanas, it might be a harder question to answer. But if you have no training, that's the one thing we say about Satipatthana Vipassana. Without the jhanas, is that it's quicker. It's more streamlined, and so it's something that you can see results quicker. Goenka talks about this in the Goenka tradition. He said that he had some Tibetan. Apparently, this is what I've heard. He had some Tibetan monks were sent to him, and in 3 days they were seeing lights and visions and colors and all sorts of awesome magical things. And they were shocked because they had been practicing for years. They had gotten these things before, but usually it took them months, if not years, to have the same states. And in 3 days they got this. And I've definitely can vouch for that. I've seen people come to meditate and were just amazed at how quickly, as compared to other techniques. how quickly they were able to gain progress. It's really quite profound when you do an intensive course. Even in just a week, you can really shake things up.
Is avoiding psychoactive substances not simply ignoring the various states of consciousness, or isn't that the point?
You want me to say it? No? You want me to say it? Go ahead, do drugs. Yes, meditate and do drugs. That's awesome. I'm not going to say it. I just said it. Psychoactive drugs. Right. I mean, an interesting argument. There are lots of similar arguments like that. If you refrain from X, aren't you just avoiding part of reality? And if you want to understand all of reality, don't you need to do everything? It's actually the argument, I think, posed in, well, I think it's part of the argument of Siddhartha, right? This book by Hermann Hesse. Someone brought it up today. Was asking me if I'd read Siddhartha, and we were discussing the merits of the book. I read it many, many years ago, like when I was 14, 15, 16, I don't remember. But no, it's Buddhism doesn't hold such an idea that you have to. Buddhism uh, argues against the idea that you need to know everything. You could argue that a Buddha might have to do lots and lots of different things, but even still, what's most important is to understand the building blocks of reality. If you have a Lego structure, you don't have to understand all the how this fits together and that, because you know how the building blocks are, how Legos fit together. You understand the concept. You can build the house based on very simple concepts. But I don't know. They don't have can't follow the Lego metaphor. But if you're drunk, if you're on drugs, you can't understand the building blocks to reality. So all those minds that you're like, suppose let's take an easier example, because drugs, as I've said, you have to take them individually. They all do different things. But alcohol, you say, well, you have to get drunk, otherwise you can't understand what it's like to be drunk. A drunk person doesn't understand what it's like to be drunk. They don't have a clue what's going on. The more you drink, the less aware and observant they are of what's going on, because your brain shuts down, your mind has a very difficult time functioning. Whereas a person who understands reality can look at a drunk person and say, I know, I can see what's going on with that person. If the person has a clear knowledge of the building blocks of reality, they can understand what it means to be drunk. They can understand people, no matter what their state. They can understand people who are on drugs. You can see, just talking to a person, listening to them, you can feel the dissonance. What's wrong with them? That's why I say a person who's on medication, you can tell there's something different about them. If you've been practicing meditation, if you've been teaching meditation, especially, this is why I say medication. It's it's hard to accept that people could finish a course on meditation, because you can tell they're stuck. Psychoactive drugs, don't get me started. I've done them all, not all of them. I've done many of them. They make it difficult. They twist things, and they're artificial. Because they're artificial, they're not able. The state that you're in is not a good one for understanding reality, because it's artificial. It's based on a very specific set of chemical reactions. Or I guess you could argue that even on alcohol, one could be mindful. I don't know. It's an interesting argument, because it's just physical, right? So couldn't the mind still be mindful? I've never tried, actually. Seems. I mean, I know that for most people that's a ridiculous suggestion, but for an arahant, if an arahant or a Buddha couldn't. But say an arahant were to drink alcohol, what would be the result? It's an interesting question.
Can you talk a little bit more in depth about what is meant by the defilements?
The defilements are just states of mind that are karmically potent in a negative way, they will have negative consequences that lead to further suffering. So greed, anger, and delusion. The three basic ones are lobha, dosa, and moha. Greed, anger, and delusion. These three things have necessary negative consequences, no matter what. There's no getting around them. I mean, there's negating them, so it's possible that they can be canceled out by other factors, but they themselves will never have a positive result, and they themselves can't help but contribute to your pot of karma in a negative way.
Today we can read the teachings of many teachers. Why should we trust the Buddha's teaching? How do we know it to be the truth?
Well, today you would look at a teacher who's teaching the Buddha's teaching, and you would say, wow, that person knows what they're talking about. You might practice their teachings and say, wow, this teaching is beneficial. And you might hear that teacher talking about the Buddha and realizing that they have respect and faith in the Buddha. And you say, well, this person who I respect respects the Buddha. So it makes sense for me to respect the Buddha. But sorry, just specifically for following the teachings, you would only follow them if you thought they made sense and if the people teaching them seem to be reasonable people and have some insight into reality. And then when you put them into practice and understood that they or realized that they do have a true and real benefit, then you would continue or you would further your practice. If they didn't, then you would stop.
Could you speak about some of the stages of mental or spiritual development one goes through when practicing the tradition of meditation you teach?
I've started to do this in my book, the second book. So I'd recommend you read the second book on how to meditate. That's probably better than me trying to go through it here because it's a bit lengthy. I mean, the book doesn't go into great detail, but basically you first you start to understand the building blocks, right? You have to get the right frame of reference. So that's understanding body and mind, understanding what reality is really made of from a Buddhist point of view. You have to shift your paradigm away from space-time, 4 dimensions, to look at reality from a individual point of view, like experience, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, and thinking. Reality is based on that. Once you do that, then the practice starts, and basically you come to understand that the things that you cling to are not worth clinging to, the things that you run away from are not worth running away from. It's not worth your time or your energy to cling to these things. Why? Because they're impermanent, suffering, and non-self. Unstable, unsatisfying, uncontrollable. And so you let go of things. And when you let go, you're free. When you're free, you say, I'm free. That's how it's described.
In your eyes, is there any truth to things like Reiki, crystal powers, and energy healing, or is it all a scam? Would being involved in such things be harmful to meditation practice?
Those are 2 different questions, I think. So I don't think it's all a scam. I think probably some of it is a scam, and some of it is placebo, and some of it is um, confirmation bias, that kind of thing. But I bet some of it has some truth to it. I bet there's something to Reiki that some people do. There's some energy. I'm not sure, actually. I mean, scientists seem to have done very well disproving this stuff, but I guess I don't know. But more pertinent is the second question, because yeah, it's all nonsense. Forget about it. It's not meditation. It's not useful in meditation. It's not. Boy, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this one, right? but, but no, I have to go on record as saying that it's not useful for meditation. Even Reiki. Healing of any sort, physical healing. Once you get caught up in worrying about the body, worrying about physical problems, I guess the best you could say about it is if it works, if it does heal you, then it's functionally useful to get you back in a position where you can function, right, as a human being. So it's mundane, it has mundane benefits that we would recognize and say, well, that's good, because if you get back into shape, then your meditation goes better. But the problem is people get attached to these things. Any little thing comes up, oh, time for Reiki, time for energy crystals, and so on. But if there was some way to, if you were out of balance, or like if Reiki could heal your broken leg or something like that, well, then you could walk again. I mean, examples like that are pretty reasonable, I think. But still, ultimately much better to focus on insight. And then they can get in the way if your meditation incorporates these things, as you start getting the wrong idea of what is and what isn't the path. A very important insight: purification by knowledge and vision of what is the path and what is not the path.
What's the proper translation of dukkha? Tanisaro translates it as stress. Is this accurate?
Well, dukkha is the opposite of sukha. So if you translate dukkha as stress, what are you going to translate the opposite? What's the opposite of stress? Unstress? Lack of stress?
Distress.
Eustress is a kind of stress, actually, but yeah, you could argue that. So I don't like it as a translation. I mean, people use it, but it's not really what it means. It's not what it means, because when when you have pain in the body, that's called dukkha. It's dukkha kaya vedana, or yeah, something like that. Dukkha kaya vinyana or something. No, dukkha vedana. Hmm. So is that mean the body is stressed? Yeah, you can twist it that way, but that's not what the word means. The word means suffering or pain. So sukha can mean happiness or it can mean pleasure. I would say those are the very basic translations. Dukkha means pain or displeasure or unhappiness. No, not displeasure, pain or unhappiness. Sukha means pleasure or happiness. And I guess that's whether it's physical or mental. If it's mental, it's often called somanassa and domanassa instead of dukkha and sukha, but it's also often called dukkha and sukha, even if it's mental. Don't go by Tanisro's translations. I'm sorry to say, he's a great monk, knows a lot about the Vinaya, but he's got his own ideas about translation. I'm not the only one to say that. I shouldn't say that on public. I'm sorry. I don't mean to attack him, but if you want my opinion, there's really good standard translations. Bhikkhu Bodhi, I think many people agree that he's just awesome in his translations. He's really put some thought, and it's like there's many different teachers. Like Tanisaro is one. They've come up with their own ideas, their own ways of translating things, but they're not very standard, and they haven't taken the middle of the road path. It's not something that we can all sort of be happy with. Some people are very happy with it, but many people are not very happy with it. So with Bhikkhu Bodhi, he's our monk's monk, or what do you say, Buddhist's Buddhist. He's the middle of the road kind of guy, which is important. Some people might not like it because it's not radical enough or it's not precise enough. But he's very precise and he's pretty awesome. So recommend his translations, and I'm pretty sure he calls it suffering.
I've heard dukkha translated as stress and also disease, not disease, but unease, disease. And I wondered if it was, maybe to make it more palatable, because for people that aren't accustomed to it, to hear suffering, it just sounds depressing. But when you say stress or disease, that's something people can relate to and they wouldn't protest it.
I mean,
So
that's a complaint, but is it really true? I mean, do people? I think when people don't understand, like I think I remember when I was a teenager, I wrote a paper on Buddhism. I wasn't Buddhist, but it's funny. I wrote this paper on Buddhism, and I was looking for criticism, so I picked that out, and I said, yeah, they're big on suffering, but I didn't understand, and wasn't turned off by it. I was just looking for something to criticize because, I guess criticism sells. It's my bad karma. That's why I have to teach Buddhism now. Um,
It's just hard to describe suffering to people who feel pretty happy, people who haven't studied this and haven't really thought about it. And
Sure.
they protest. No, I'm not suffering. I'm doing great. You,
But it's
you
hard to
Buddhists
teach
do such
Buddhism
depressing.
to such people, I think,
Yeah.
because Buddhism is about, you have to understand that there's a problem. You have to be stirred. You have to be moved in order to take action. People who have good lives are, it's hard to move them. Sometimes they can be moved, but I think they're moved by the same, if they get it. If you talk about suffering and they don't get it, then that's not a person I would argue that you should be teaching Buddhism to. They don't get suffering. Because it is. We're talking about suffering. Really, I think it's an awesome translation because that's really it. Do you suffer? Does your life have any suffering in it? Well, that's what Buddhism is all about. We can help you with that.
Yeah.
The only argument is when people say, well, suffering is good and useful and so on.
But I think there's denial too, with people who haven't considered this, just denial. Oh no, I
If
don't
they're
suffer.
denied, then
But
that's a sign that they're not a good candidate.
yeah,
Because remember, we're not looking for converts. Today I was quite conscious of this fact. Everybody around us was like, "Hey, sign up! Free gum, free chocolate bars." They were actually giving out candy. I mean, not to diss them or anything. They were nice people. But that's their religion, is about anything to get people, because the gum had like stickers on it, I think, with their website and stuff. But we're not like that. So it was more like just stand there because maybe someone is looking for us, and if they're looking for us, they'll find us. And that's how it happened. The people who came up were 90% of them were sure this is where they wanted to be. So some people, I started after a while, if someone looked at it and paused for a while, I would say, "Are you interested in meditation and Buddhism?" I was interested in meditation and Buddhism, and maybe they just keep walking. But usually, when they heard meditation, it was interesting. But most people were like, "Yes," and they just sign up. Some people didn't even talk to us; they just walked up, and we had this computer thing set up, and they just signed up. So I mean, that's enough, really. I mean, once you've got those people, what are you doing looking for more? And if you don't have those people, why are you looking for more anyway? Right? Why are we looking? I
and
think so. I'm not convinced, because suffering to me just hits straight to the point. Yes, I suffer, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm practicing Buddhism, because I see that.
I wouldn't suggest that people are out, trying to recruit the masses, but with your family members, with people you really care about, and you're trying to, and they're asking you what you see in Buddhism, what you see in meditation, and you're trying to explain it. Suffering is hard to explain because, again, for people who haven't considered it, they may just be in denial, but stress it's a little more understandable, I would say, to people who haven't considered it.
Well, when you have to live in a situation where you're close to people who are not like you, then for sure. But that's just a problem with your situation. You have to finesse things and water things down. But that doesn't mean it's an honest translation. You're finessing things. You're fudging it because of your situation. I mean, that's what a family is. I don't live with my family anymore, and it's part of the reason we're we're fairly close, but not that close. Living with them would not be possible because we don't see eye to eye on these things. I mean, how many monks in the Buddhist time were not able to convince their parents? Not able, had to leave behind their families because of this. But you know, so if you have to, you have to. It doesn't mean that stress is the proper translation. But that's what you said. You said it's for to to ease it on people. But I think yes, in the case where you have to, but no, not in the case where you say, well, I'm going to say stress all the time because that's just going to be easier for people to understand. You're not honest. If that's how you're presenting Buddhism to as a teacher, sorry, I don't mean to attack Tanisaro or anyone, but um, it's not how I would do it. I would cut straight to the core, and if they're not interested, hey, that's cool. Talked to one guy today. It was interesting. Um, he said, "How did it start?" He said, "What's the one? Can you give me one thing that Buddhists believe?" And I said, well, Buddhists don't really believe anything. Or no, I said, no, I didn't say that. I said, Buddhism's not really about belief. It's more about understanding. I mean, Buddhism makes certain claims, but we claim that our claims are verifiable. And he said, well, what's one claim that Buddhism makes? And I have to think, right away, what's a good claim? So I gave the most obvious one. I said that suffering is caused by our attachments or by clinging or something, and if we're able to let go, then you don't suffer. And he said, "Oh, well, that makes sense." And so he signed up. I mean, I was suffering. I brought suffering up, and he didn't cringe or say, "Oh, suffering." No one does. We really don't, because we have suffering. Honest people have suffering. It's the people. It's more. I hear this. I see people say, but okay, so family members, I'll go for that. But it's mostly like that. It's people who are looking to criticize. They don't really want you to be Buddhist. They wish you were like them. So if you're a Christian family, they wish you were Christian. So when you come to them with Buddhism, gee, you're not talking to people who are interested in Buddhism. If they're interested and open-minded, it's not a hard sell. Suffering is not a hard sell. Anyone who's honest.
I agree.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
That's okay.
So,
Bhante, can quality of mind be less defiled, or can IQ be more thorough through good karma and rebirth?
yes.
Can you talk about guiding the mind in the proper way, like guiding the mind versus forcing the mind?
Well, it's all about observing, even your state of mind. Like observing that you're not mindful, observing that you are, um, observing even that you're forcing the mind, observing that your mind is not acting the way you want it to act. It's a very tricky thing, It's like trying to catch a fish. It very easily slips out of your hands. So, there's no, if you have the right principle, like that's a good principle to have, not forcing, just, what is the word you say? Guiding. No, it's not even guiding exactly, because guiding, I would say you're still gonna have trouble with that one if your principle is guiding. Think observing, and really just observing again and again, no matter how much you want to guide, how much you want to control. Just observe, and observe when you want to guide, observe when you want to control. And just keep observing. And then when you get frustrated because you're like, what's going on? No, this is useless. What good is this? What good is it just to watch? I'm not getting anywhere. Well, then observe that. Observe the frustration with this stupid meditation meditation teaching that I've given you to just do nothing, right? Observe that when you don't like it. And you'll become honest. It's a lot like the Karate Kid, where he'd do it so much and he thinks, this is useless. He trains his body by painting the fence. The old Karate Kid, not the new one. There's a new one I heard. Don't know what it was about. And they wax on, wax off. So doing these things, and he gets frustrated after a while, thinking that he's just performing manual slave labor. And then Mr. Miyagi, is that his name? He, he shows him how he's actually trained himself. So it'll be a lot like that. You'll realize that you really gain something from this nothingness, from this. Anyway, I hope that's useful.
I have problems with nightmares. Can I use meditation to get rid of them?
Yeah, yeah. If you meditate more, you'll have fewer nightmares. It might take a while. I mean, sometimes it's stuff. The meditation doesn't did make things disappear. It slowly works them out. So sometimes that means a big bubble of whatever has to come up. The brain is set in its ways, and You could still have nightmares years later, but for sure the meditation will slowly work to ease them. And even slowly, it does a lot of work quickly. But over the long term, you might still have some, but you know, very quickly you should get some results, especially for things like nightmares.
I have problems with meditation regularly. Should I try meditating on death? And if so, how?
Yeah, meditation on deathbeds. Think about how you have to die. Think about how you're going to die. You can actually just say to yourself, death, death, death. And just repeat that to yourself. It's quite disturbing, I think. So I shouldn't laugh. It is, it's a valid meditation practice. It just sounds kind of funny.
We read that in Visuddhimagga
We read in
in class.
Visuddhimagga that's
Yeah,
what you do. You say death.
say death.
Yeah. Um, you know, practicing regularly, it's a difficult thing. Sometimes you just eventually get to the point where you want to meditate daily. It may take you time to want to do it. The best way to want to do it is come and do an intensive course. Find a place to do an intensive course because it changes the foundation. You see, you're trying to build on a shaky foundation. You're trying to work at the same time that the foundation is moving, meaning you're living your life and then you're trying to fix the problem. It's like trying to fix a pipe while the water is on. You should turn the water off first. So doing a meditation course, it fixes everything. It gets everything stable so you can build on that. Much easier to have a regular practice. But that being said, it just has to come to you. You have to be patient and keep trying. With all things, keep trying. That's the wonderful thing about Buddhism. It's never too late. You have eternity. It's quite relieving, actually. You have eternity to do this. I probably shouldn't say this because you're already lazy, right? But you can do it anytime. Sometimes laziness comes from pushing yourself. You push and it's so stressful that you think, I can't do it, I'm a failure. I just won't even try. But if you know you have eternity, then you're like, okay, well, how am I going to spend my eternity? Maybe I'll try and keep trying. If the great thing about eternity is if you have eternity, then no effort is too small. And I think it's encouraging. I don't know. Maybe I don't think it leads to complacency. To understand eternity. You understand eternity, then you're like, well, maybe I should do something. But it's honest, It's not like out of fear or guilt or something. It's honest. This is what I'm going to do, and then it comes from the heart. It's really you have this because it's different. Doing it out of fear of death is different from doing it out of real intention and real certainty that what you're doing is an awesome thing. It's just an idea because death is considered to be useful, so you shouldn't discard that.
Is it wise to refrain from controlled fear stimuli like horror films or morbid internet images, or does it essentially make no difference?
Well, fear is unwholesome, so you got to weigh the pros and the cons. If you're able to um, learn how to not be afraid, learn to be mindful during the horror films or something, then yeah, it's useful. But if it just reaffirms your fear, then it is unwholesomeness.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between Goenka's Vipassana technique and the Vipassana technique you teach?
It's quite different. They don't do walking is the most obvious difference. But the whole technique is different. They do 3 days of anapanasati, which is samatha meditation. And then they start in on vipassana. And their idea of vipassana is to do this body scanning, as I understand. So they go through the body looking for sankharas. We've talked about it. I suppose that article is no longer on the internet, but we had an interesting discussion on our Q&A forum, which I think I've taken down now. Um, yeah, it's different. It's not something I'd really recommend, but it does seem to help people. It does seem to be a positive meditation practice. I just don't. I don't really follow that line of thought.
Just my own little add-on question to that. Those courses are so numerous all over the world. I've seen people like on Stack Exchange a lot, kind of suggesting, well, go to that even if it's not really what you want to learn, because
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to find a place that teaches that.
Yeah.
And would you consider going to a place like that to make it harder to eventually move over to a different technique, like your own, for example, if that's what someone was ultimately interested in?
It seems to actually. I mean, I would normally say no. It's any meditation is good, but it does seem that Goenka people have a hard time with our technique because they get so fixed. It creates a high concentration. It's hard to be flexible. They don't want to feel the state of flexibility that our meditation. I mean, they seem to have very strong concentration, and that can be a boon, but it can also be. It feels to us like they're forcing things, and that's hard to overcome. That being said, they certainly have they have strong minds coming out of this practice. I mean, to sit still for so long, in and of itself, is builds strength. And they are doing some sort of contemplation of the body and the feelings. So it's not unwholesome, unless it's delusion based, which I don't really think it is. Maybe a little, but that's maybe a bias of mine. I guess that's the thing, is we might be concerned that it involves delusion, in which case, if it does cultivate delusion, then that's problematic for proper meditation. But obviously they don't think it does. And I'm not sure that it does. It's just, I'm suspicious.
Is Bhikkhu Bodhi coming on here?
I don't have the nerve to invite him, not yet. We need a few interviews under our belt first. I have contacted the bhikkhuni in the area. I tried calling her, but that didn't work. So now I've tried Facebooking her. Our linguistics professor, she's not English native speaker, and she asked us today. Someone mentioned googling as a verb, and that was an example of a new word. And she said, "Yeah, you can even say Facebook someone." And she said, "Don't you say that?" And she asked the class, "Isn't that something you can say?" Sorry, I'm getting off track. But I don't know. Can you say I Facebooked her? Not really. She didn't reply yet.
Well, I think everyone would know what you mean in any case if you said it. Whether it's proper or not is another situation. What if one constantly dislikes the unsatisfactoriness of the world?
Then you would say disliking, disliking. And that would help you overcome it. You should read my booklet. Simon says,
Mhm.
it's not the meditation app, but you have to meditate. You can do it on the website. We've got less than half of us names are green. That's not a good sign. So all of you who haven't done meditation, are you sure you're on the right site? This is a site for meditators. If you come here to ask questions, that's okay. But if you're not meditating, I'm going to get fed up and I'm going to stop answering questions. And I'll just say, it's not worth my time. They're not really meditating. So, but if you just happen to not have time or you meditated earlier or something, it only records purposefully, it only remembers your meditation for like 3 hours or something. I don't remember. So if you meditated before that, it won't, your name turns back to orange. but orange does mean not a meditator.
Is it okay to send a subway card to the old address or the new address?
It's okay. Um, Absolutely fine. I don't want to direct or redirect. So if that's your intention, that's cool. But I found all the subway cards. I was looking for them in the move, and I thought, did I leave them? Did I throw them out? But I found them, and there's a whole bunch of them, which is awesome. It's gonna last many weeks, I think. But I've got a lot of them. The Tim Hortons is next door. No, this is really something I want to say. For 2 days, I went in there to get oatmeal with a Tim card, and they don't have a scanner, so it's really difficult for them to. I mean, they're having troubles with it, and so the woman this morning couldn't figure out how to use it, and then the manager came out and to help her, and she saw me, and she said, "Oh, we'll just ring it through. Yeah, that doesn't matter." And I'm pretty sure she didn't charge me for it purposefully, which is, I mean, wow, generous. And she said, "Oh yeah, he's a regular. You're a regular, aren't you? Coming in here? Saw you come in yesterday." I said, "Yeah, I just moved down the street." So I do plan to be a bit of a regular there, and that's just an awesome place, awesome people, and uh, I don't have. I've only got a couple of Tim Hortons cards, so. But I don't, no pressure, no pushing. It's awesome. I mean, the fact that people are giving me food is just awesome. But it is keeping me alive. So if you want me to keep doing this, I do have to be alive to do this. If you want me to be alive, well, I will be going back to Stony Creek on the weekends, and they'll feed me there. But here actually, people are awesome. One guy on our exec committee, he offered to bring me lunch, and I was kind of taken off guard by it at first. It was a new thing to me, the idea of someone going to. I wasn't quite sure what he meant actually, and I thought, did he mean that I could give him money to pay for it or something? But so I said no. The point is, I said no, and I felt kind of afterwards, I should have. He wanted to do that. That was very kind of him. But then another guy gave me a Starbucks card. He just said, "Hey, do you like Starbucks?" And I think he was really trying to do, he was really happy about what I did, and so he gave me a Starbucks card. I don't know how much or so on. But I said, well, I don't drink the coffee, but I'm sure they have something there that I could, maybe they have breakfast. Anyway, thank you. Blessings to everyone. That's just, they said it couldn't be done. They said, moving to the West, you're not going to be able to do this. So here I am, for free, right? Without using money and without charging for your teachings. There was one woman today. She was awesome. Oh, I've got stories from today. Woman came up to us and she said she was wearing a, what do you call it? Burqa is the head thing? The shawl?
Hajib? Habib?
Not the full thing, just the head thing.
Yeah, it's
I
something
think
like Habib.
I think she was Muslim, but it wasn't clear because it was also raining. So she may have been Hindu. Hindus also wear that, some of them, right? Or no? I don't know. Anyway, probably Muslim. But she came and she saw it. I said, "You're interested in meditation?" She said, "Yes." "How much is it?" And I looked at her and I said, "What? Free?" And she said, "Free?" And it was so funny because she was just ecstatic, really. She couldn't believe that this was available and that it was free. I said, "We're going to have all these things, and and how much does it cost?" "Oh, it's all free." And then I said, "Listen, I have residential courses." Oh no, then I said, "I do residential courses." And she's thinking, "Oh, here we go." And where people come and stay with me for 21 days. And she said, "Oh yeah, how much does that cost?" I said, "Free." And she couldn't believe it. I said, "We give you food, we give you lodging and teachings." all free of charge. And I mean, it's heartwarming to be able to. It's unfathomable that that's possible, and yet it seems possible. And then I gave her a booklet, and I said, "This is free as well." I gave out free booklets. I mean, the other people were doing it. It's not, the other religions, they were giving out chocolate. They were giving out a lot more than we were giving out. But none of them gave out any teachings, I don't think. We gave out booklets on how to meditate.
And in the long run, that's a lot more valuable than a chocolate. I get so many insights and epiphanies during meditation, and I'm never sure if I should pursue them or observe them and then go back to meditating without exploring the insights mentally.
It's awesome that you have epiphanies. That's something that you should experience. It's kind of epiphanies. But they're not useful in and of themselves. Exploring them, you've missed the moment. The moment was when you had the epiphany. That's all that's required. It's not practice to go over the epiphany, to think about it. Once you start thinking about it, it's no longer of any use. It's now becoming ratiocination, whatever you call it, mental thought. So let it go mindfully. If you are curious or interested, that's tanha, that's craving, attachment. You should note wanting, curious, liking, then just thinking, and let it go.
What is your view of being born left-handed in a dominantly right-handed world?
Probably bad karma, I don't know. It's an interesting idea. I mean, this is all speculation. Who knows? Karma is not something you can speculate on. No, it's something. In that case, you probably could. And if you had some mechanism by which you could see people going from one life to the next, you could probably develop a theory as to why people. But for me to say it, I don't know. It'd just be speculation. I didn't even turn on my light. How's that? Is that better?
It's actually the same.
But I
It,
lost the shadow. There was a shadow of my nose right here.
oh, okay.
No more shadows.
It looked okay. The only thing that's a little hard is that red background.
I don't
Gotta,
like the red background.
I don't know. Maybe people on the site can weigh in, but to me, the red background's a little hard.
Red is supposed to be hostile. You don't want
Yeah,
red because it's
yeah.
hostility.
It also it doesn't it clashes with the orange of the robe, so I don't know.
I bet it goes good
Trying to.
with, what was that background thing where you could put a background on now? Hang it?
Oh, yes. Maybe we'll always have to use that feature. Put a fake background on you, at least until maybe some volunteers can paint your room at some time. That would be awesome.
Yeah, well, probably.
When sick, I'm able to note pain during meditation, but nausea is overwhelming.
We still have more questions? Aren't we over
We
time
have
already?
so many questions.
All right, well, they're
Yeah.
going to all have to wait till tomorrow.
Okay.
Especially because look at how few people have actually practiced meditation.
Okay.
So tomorrow I expect more green.
Well, I
More,
have one
gr-
question. One
more
question,
green
but
or fewer questions.
I have one question, but it's an easy question.
Right?
You have an Amazon wish list, which some people might like to check out. Did you remember to change your address to the new
No,
address?
not yet. Um,
Yeah.
I didn't answer that question whether the old address or the new address. The new address is better, I think, because I'm here 5 days a week. I'm only at Stony Creek on the weekends. So I will get mail here now. And in the future, I'm going to be here 7 days a week. But during the rains, I have to. I'm officially staying in Stony Creek. I'm just here on, you could say, a mission for 5 days. But I have to go back to my home monastery during the rains. It's just a technicality. But yeah, I'm here most of the time, so the new address is better. Um, but yeah, Amazon have to just change the address. I mean, send to the other place, I will get it. Anyway, I'm gonna stop there. Sorry we
Okay.
didn't get to all the questions. But you weren't doing enough meditating.
Thank you, Bante. Good night.
Thank you, Robin, for your help. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a good night.